Lisa Carter stared at her computer screen as strange signals danced across the display. The Deep Space Monitoring Station Meridian had been her home for 3 years now, floating in the dark between Earth and Mars. Most days brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional message from supply ships. Today felt different. The signal came from somewhere far beyond human space, weak and broken like a voice calling through a storm. Lisa adjusted her headset and leaned closer to the screen. The patterns looked unlike anything in their database of known transmissions. This was not human technology. Jake Martinez rolled his chair over from the next workstation. His coffee mug read, "Galaxy's Best Tech Guy," in faded letters. He had been working the night shift for 5 years and knew every sound the station made. This new signal had caught his attention too. "What do you think it is?" Jake asked as he studied the waveforms on Lisa's screen. The patterns repeated every few minutes but with slight changes each time. Someone or something was definitely trying to communicate. Lisa pulled up the translation software that Earth scientists had developed for contact with alien species. The program was mostly theoretical since humans had never received a real alien message before. A few trade contacts existed with distant species, but nothing like this desperate transmission. The computer worked for 20 minutes, comparing the signal patterns to mathematical concepts and basic communication principles. Slowly, fragments of meaning began to appear on the screen. The word help came first, then dying and children. Jake felt his stomach tighten as more words appeared. Burning, genocide, please. This was not a friendly greeting from curious aliens. This was a cry for help from someone facing death. Lisa called Captain Dan Brooks immediately. Brooks commanded the USS Vengeance, a heavy cruiser stationed near Meridian for patrol duties. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles during the Mars colony wars. Brooks took the elevator up to the communications deck within minutes of Lisa's call. The captain read the translated message fragments in silence. His face remained calm, but Lisa noticed his hands clenching into fists. Brooks had lost his brother during a pirate raid on a civilian transport. He knew what helpless people faced when violent predators found them. "Keep working on the translation," Brooks told them. "I need to know everything this message contains." Over the next 4 hours, Lisa and Jake pieced together the full transmission. The aliens called themselves the Kelhari. They lived on a blue world covered mostly by oceans, building their cities both above and below the water. The Kelhari had developed space travel but preferred to explore rather than fight. They had never built a real military. The message told a story of horror. Ships had appeared in Kelhari space 3 months ago, belonging to something called the Vaxan Empire. The Vaxan demanded complete surrender and tribute from the Kelhari. When the peaceful aliens tried to negotiate, the Vaxan began bombing their cities. The transmission described orbital platforms burning in space and colonies being destroyed one by one. Vaxan soldiers landed on the surface to capture Kelhari, children for slavery. Ancient libraries and cultural centers were burned for sport. The Kelhari military, designed for exploration rather than war, fell within days. Most chilling were the details about Vaxan methods. They did not simply conquer and move on. The Vaxan Empire seemed to enjoy causing fear and suffering. They would capture a city and torture its leaders in public before killing them. They forced parents to watch their children being taken away. The Kelhari described it as cruelty for its own sake. The message ended with coordinates to the Kelhari, home system, and a desperate plea. Any species that received this transmission was begged to help stop the genocide. The Kelhari knew they would all be dead soon, but maybe someone could save their children or prevent this from happening to other peaceful worlds. Captain Brooks forwarded the complete translation to Admiral Kate Sullivan at Earth Defense Command. Sullivan was known throughout the fleet as someone who made fast decisions and stuck by them. She had commanded ships during the asteroid mining wars and understood both space combat and human nature. The response came back within 2 hours. Earth Defense Command was calling an emergency meeting of the Fleet Council. Every ship captain within range of Earth was ordered to attend either in person or by secure communication link. This was bigger than any single ship or station could handle. Admiral Sullivan opened the meeting with the translated Kelhari message displayed for everyone to see. The room filled with angry murmurs as the details of vaccine cruelty became clear. These were not soldiers fighting for resources or territory. These were monsters who enjoyed causing pain. Captain Brooks spoke first during the discussion period. "We have to respond," he said simply. "No military force should stand by while innocent people face genocide." Some voices disagreed. "Commander." Helen Ross pointed out that Earth's fleet was designed for system defense, not long-range operations. The Kelhari homeworld was months away even at maximum speed. Earth would be leaving itself vulnerable by sending ships so far from home. Captain Lisa Webb argued that humans could not ignore a direct request for help against genocide. "If we turn away from this, what makes us different from the vaccine?" she asked the council. "We either believe in protecting innocent life or we do not." The debate continued for 3 hours. Some officers worried about picking a fight with an unknown alien empire. Others pointed out that the vaccine might come for human space eventually, if they were not stopped. A few suggested sending a small, diplomatic mission instead of military forces. Admiral Sullivan listened to every opinion before making her decision. She stood at the front of the room and looked at each officer through the communication screens. Her voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "Humanity will respond to this SOS with military force," Sullivan announced. "We will not allow genocide to continue while we have the power to stop it. Begin immediate preparations for long-range fleet operations." The meeting ended with orders for every available ship to prepare for departure. Captain Brooks felt something cold and determined settle in his chest as he returned to the Vengeance. The Kelhari had called for help, and Earth's children were coming. The Vaxxan Empire was about to learn what happened when predators targeted the innocent within reach of humanity's ships. News of the alien genocide spread through human space faster than any official announcement could travel. Military bases from Luna to the asteroid belt buzzed with activity as word passed between soldiers, pilots, and ship crews. Something big was happening, and everyone wanted to be part of it. Sergeant Roy Chen was cleaning his rifle in the barracks on Mars base when his squad leader burst through the door. The man's face was flushed with excitement as he announced that volunteers were needed for something called Operation Lifeline. Chen had served in 3 different conflicts and knew the look of a mission that mattered. He signed up within the hour. Lieutenant Amy Foster was running training exercises with her fighter squadron when the call came through. Her pilots were some of the best in the fleet, recruited from Earth's most dangerous air forces. Foster had flown combat missions over the Sahara Desert and knew how to fight in conditions that would kill most people. When she heard about alien children being taken as slaves, she volunteered her entire squadron. The response was unprecedented in human military history. Soldiers who had been scheduled for leave canceled their plans. Retired veterans called their old units asking to return to service. Ship crews worked double shifts to prepare their vessels for long-range operations. Something primal had awakened in humanity, and it demanded action. Fleet Admiral Steve Parker received command of the largest human armada ever assembled. Parker was a quiet man who preferred reading ancient military history to attending social functions. He had studied every major conflict from Alexander the Great to the Mars colony wars. Now he faced something entirely new: leading humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. Ships that had been scattered across the solar system for routine patrols began converging near Jupiter. The massive dreadnought UES Retribution led the formation, its hull black as space and bristling with weapons designed to crack asteroids. Behind it came dozens of cruisers, destroyers, and assault carriers, each filled with soldiers eager to face the Vaxxan Empire. Captain Dan Brooks brought the USS Vengeance into formation alongside ships he had only seen in fleet exercises. The sight of so many human warships gathered in one place sent chills down his spine. Earth had never assembled this much firepower for any single mission. The Kelhari SOS had united humanity in a way that no political speech or diplomatic agreement ever could. Dr. Helen Ross worked frantically in the intelligence section, gathering every scrap of information about the Vaxxan Empire. Most of what she found came from brief contacts with other alien species who traded with humans. The picture that emerged was terrifying and infuriating in equal measure. The Vaxxan viewed warfare as an art form, rather than a practical necessity. They preferred to break their enemies psychologically before delivering killing blows. Their ships were designed to look intimidating rather than function efficiently. Vaxxan soldiers wore elaborate armor that served more as ceremony than protection. They had conquered dozens of species using fear and spectacle rather than superior technology. Ross briefed the fleet commanders using holographic displays that showed Vaxxan ship designs and battle tactics. Their vessels were sleek and elegant, built to inspire awe in their enemies. Vaxxan fleets moved in precise formations that looked impressive, but left them vulnerable to coordinated attacks. Most importantly, they had never faced an enemy that fought back effectively. Marine Colonel Nick Taylor drilled his troops relentlessly during the journey to Kalahari space. The Marines came from Earth's harshest environments, recruited from mountain ranges, deserts, and Arctic regions where only the strongest survived. Many carried genetic advantages from generations of ancestors who had lived in places that would kill most humans. Taylor's Marines trained for ship-to-ship combat in zero-gravity and planetary assault under unknown atmospheric conditions. They practiced fighting in tight corridors, open spaces, and everything in between. Each Marine carried weapons designed from centuries of human conflict, tested in battles across Earth and the colonies. The colonel himself was a veteran of the Titan ice wars where human soldiers had fought in conditions cold enough to freeze metal. He had lost half his unit in those campaigns but learned that humans could survive and fight in environments that would stop most species cold. Taylor intended to teach the Vaxxan Empire that same lesson. As the fleet prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Captain Brooks recorded a message that would be broadcast on all frequencies once they reached Kalahari space. He stood in his ready room looking out at the stars, thinking about the alien children being held as slaves somewhere in the darkness. To the Kalahari people, Brooks spoke into the recording device. Help is coming. Humanity has heard your call, and we will not abandon you. To the Vaxxan Empire, you have awakened something you cannot comprehend. You prey on the innocent and call it strength. You torture the helpless and call it victory. But you have never faced a species that evolved by fighting for survival every single day. Brooks paused, remembering his brother's death at the hands of pirates who thought civilians were easy targets. Humanity does not forgive attacks on innocent people. Humanity does not forget genocide. You wanted to show the galaxy what fear looks like. Now you will learn what it means to be afraid. The fleet entered hyperspace as a single unit, hundreds of human warships carrying thousands of soldiers toward a distant star system. They were leaving human space for the first time as conquerors rather than explorers. The Kalahari had asked for help, and Earth's children were bringing everything they had. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of his flagship as the stars became lines of light outside the viewports. Somewhere ahead lay a species facing extinction, and an empire that thought cruelty was strength. The Vaxxan had spent centuries building their reputation as unstoppable predators. They were about to meet the apex predators of a world where only survivors lived long enough to have children. The journey would take 3 weeks at maximum hyperspace speed. Parker used that time to refine his battle plans and study every detail of Vaxxan tactics. He had read about their ceremonial approach to warfare and their need to intimidate before attacking. The Admiral smiled grimly as he realized the Vaxxan had no idea what was coming for them. Humanity was bringing the violence of a death world to a species that had never faced real opposition. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when predators made the mistake of threatening the innocent, within reach of Earth's most dangerous children. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalahari system and found a scene of destruction that made Admiral Parker's blood run cold. Massive orbital stations hung in space like broken toys, their hulls split open and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Debris fields marked where defensive platforms had once protected the peaceful alien world. Vaxxan warships moved through the system like sharks in bloody water, their sleek forms beautiful and terrible as they continued their methodical destruction. The alien vessels were works of art, all flowing curves and polished metal that gleamed in the light of the system's star. They moved in perfect formations that looked like dancers performing some deadly ballet. Captain Dan Brooks watched the tactical display as his sensors counted enemy ships. 15 heavy cruisers, dozens of smaller vessels, and one massive command ship that dwarfed everything else in the system. The Vaxan fleet was large enough to conquer most civilizations, but Brooks felt no fear as he studied their positions. The enemy ships were spread out across the system in a display pattern meant to inspire terror rather than provide tactical advantage. Each Vaxan vessel was broadcasting intimidating messages on multiple frequencies while systematically bombarding population centers on the planet below. They were so focused on their campaign of fear that they had not even noticed the human fleet's arrival. Admiral Parker split his forces according to the battle plan they had developed during the journey. Captain Lisa Webb would lead a rescue flotilla directly to the planet's surface to evacuate surviving Kelhari civilians. Her ships were the fastest in the fleet and carried specialized equipment for emergency rescues under combat conditions. Captain Tom Brady commanded the main battle group that would engage the Vaxan fleet directly. His dreadnoughts and heavy cruisers carried the most powerful weapons in human space, designed originally for mining operations, but perfectly suited for cracking enemy hulls. Brady was a veteran of the asteroid wars and knew how to coordinate massive firepower effectively. Commander Ryan Ellis led a strike force of fast attack ships toward the Vaxan command vessel. His mission was to capture or destroy the enemy leadership before they could escape or call for reinforcements. Ellis had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the operation, knowing that someone had to take the risk. The first shots of the battle came from Captain Brady's battle group as they closed to weapons range with the nearest Vaxan formation. Human railguns opened fire from distances that surprised the enemy completely. Solid metal slugs traveling at significant fractions of light speed slammed into Vaxan shields with devastating effect. The aliens' energy barriers had been designed to stop the weapons used by previous enemies, mostly energy beams and plasma charges. They offered almost no protection against kinetic projectiles that simply punched through them like paper. The first Vaxan cruiser to take a direct hit from human weapons broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the darkness of space. Vaxan. Admiral Zekthar watched in shock from his command ship as 3 of his vessels died in the opening minutes of combat. His tactical officers were screaming reports that made no sense according to everything the Vaxan knew about space warfare. The enemy was firing solid projectiles instead of energy weapons, attacking from impossible ranges and showing no interest. In the traditional challenges that preceded civilized combat, Zekthar activated his communication systems and broadcast on the frequencies his opponents were using. His voice carried the authority of centuries of Vaxan dominance as he spoke the ritual words that had ended countless battles before they truly began. He offered the humans a chance to withdraw in exchange for acknowledging Vaxan superiority and paying appropriate tribute. Captain Brady's response came in the form of a concentrated missile barrage that overwhelmed the Admiral's flagship's defensive systems. Dozens of warheads designed for destroying asteroids slammed into the Vaxan command ship's hull, tearing massive holes in its elegant armor. The beautiful vessel that had terrorized a dozen star systems began venting atmosphere and debris as its crew fought desperately to contain the damage. Human fighter squadrons launched from their carriers and tore through Vaxan formations like wolves attacking sheep. Lieutenant Amy Foster led her pilots in attack patterns learned from Earth's most brutal aerial conflicts. The Vaxan had no experience fighting opponents who used three-dimensional tactics and constantly changed their approach vectors. The alien pilots flew in rigid formations that looked impressive, but made them easy targets for humans who had learned to fight in Earth's chaotic skies. Foster's squadron destroyed 6 enemy fighters in their first pass, using weapons that fired faster and hit harder than anything the Vaxan had faced before. Lieutenant Sam Green piloted his fighter through a cloud of debris from a destroyed Vaxan cruiser, hunting for enemy survivors trying to escape in lifeboats. The Vaxan crew pods were designed more for ceremony than function, slow and defenseless against human weapons. Green felt no satisfaction as he destroyed them, but he remembered the images of Kelhari children being dragged away as slaves. The battle became a massacre as human tactics proved superior to Vaxan tradition. The aliens had built their entire military around the concept of intimidation, followed by formal combat between matched opponents. They had no response to enemies who ignored their threats and attacked with overwhelming violence from unexpected directions. Captain Beth White led a boarding party onto a crippled Vaxxan destroyer, fighting through corridors filled with alien soldiers who had never faced real opposition. The Vaxxan warriors wore elaborate armor that was heavy and restrictive, designed to look frightening rather than provide protection. White's Marines cut through them like they were moving statues. Commander Ellis reached the Vaxxan command ship as it tried to flee the battle. His strike force surrounded the massive vessel and began systematically destroying its engines and weapons. The alien flagship was 10 times larger than any human ship but completely helpless once its defenses were breached. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 hours. When the shooting stopped, 3/4 of the Vaxxan fleet was destroyed or disabled. The surviving alien ships fled the system in complete disorder, their perfect formations broken and their confidence shattered. Admiral Zekthar himself was pulled from the wreckage of his command ship, more dead than alive. Captain Brooks looked at the tactical display showing human ships moving to assist with rescue operations on the Kelhari homeworld. The planet's surface was scarred, but its people would survive. More importantly, the galaxy had just witnessed something that would change everything. The Vaxxan Empire's air of invincibility had been destroyed along with their fleet. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity was just getting started. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the rescued Kelhari homeworld, and made a decision that would change galactic history forever. The immediate threat to the peaceful aliens had been eliminated, but thousands of other species remained under Vaxxan control throughout their empire. Rather than simply driving off the enemy fleet, Parker ordered his forces to pursue the fleeing Vaxxan ships back to their own territory. The message to the galaxy was clear and simple: attack innocent people and face the full wrath of humanity. There would be no negotiation, no diplomatic solution, and no mercy for those who practiced genocide. The human fleet would hunt down every Vaxxan stronghold until their empire of cruelty was completely destroyed. Intelligence Officer Commander Alex Turner worked around the clock interrogating captured Vaxxan personnel from the destroyed fleet. The aliens were terrified and confused, unable to understand how their supposedly invincible forces had been crushed so easily. Turner used their fear to extract detailed information about Vaxxan military bases, slave camps, and supply routes throughout their territory. The Vaxxan Empire controlled 47 star systems, each one built on the suffering of conquered species. Turner's intelligence revealed the locations of massive slave camps where millions of aliens from dozens of different worlds were forced to work in horrible conditions. The Vaxxan used these prisoners to mine resources, build ships, and construct monuments to their own glory. Captain Lisa Webb led the first liberation mission to a Vaxxan mining colony in the Zarian system. Her rescue flotilla arrived to find a barren world where alien prisoners were forced to extract rare metals from deep underground mines. The Vaxxan guards were few in number, relying on fear and the impossibility of escape to control their captives. Webb's Marines landed on the planet's surface and quickly overwhelmed the surprised guards. The Vaxxan soldiers were equipped for ceremony rather than real combat, their elaborate weapons slow to fire and difficult to reload. Human assault rifles cut through their ranks before they could mount any effective resistance. The liberated prisoners came from 12 different species, all of them showing signs of malnutreatment and psychological trauma. Some had been slaves for decades, their children born in captivity and knowing no other life. Many could barely believe that someone had actually come to free them from what they thought would be eternal suffering. Captain Jenny Clark commanded another liberation force that attacked a Vaxxan military academy, where young aliens were trained as slave soldiers. The facility was designed to break the spirits of captured children and turn them into obedient weapons for the Empire. Clark's assault teams moved through the compound systematically, freeing hundreds of young prisoners who had been stolen from their families. The pattern repeated itself across Vaxxan space as human forces struck target after target with devastating efficiency. Each enemy stronghold fell within hours of the human arrival, their defenders unable to cope with tactics learned from centuries of warfare on humanity's harsh homeworld. The aliens' ritualistic approach to combat left them helpless against opponents who fought to win rather than to impress. Word of the human campaign spread through the galactic community faster than any official communication. Species that had suffered under Vaxan oppression for generations, watched in amazement as their tormentors fled before the newcomers from an unknown world. Some alien governments offered covert support to the human fleet, providing intelligence and supply bases away from major trade routes. Captain Tom Brady led his battle group against the Vaxan fortress world of Kalos Prime, where the Empire's most important prisoners were held in maximum security facilities. The planet was heavily defended with orbital weapons platforms and a large fleet of patrol ships, but the defenses had been designed to keep prisoners in rather than keep attackers out. Brady's dreadnoughts punched through the orbital defenses, with the same kinetic weapons that had proven so effective in the first battle. The Vaxan platforms were beautiful works of engineering art but completely inadequate against solid projectiles fired at relativistic speeds. Within 2 hours, the planet's defensive grid was nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The ground assault on Kalos Prime revealed the true horror of Vaxan methods. The prison facilities contained alien leaders, scientists, and artists from conquered worlds, kept alive to serve as examples of what happened to those who resisted the Empire. Many had been tortured for years as entertainment for Vaxan officials, who viewed cruelty as a form of high culture. Marine Colonel Nick Taylor personally led the assault on the main prison complex, fighting through corridors lined with cells containing some of the galaxy's greatest minds. The Vaxan guards tried to execute their prisoners rather than let them be freed, but Taylor's Marines moved too fast for them to complete their final act of spite. Among the rescued prisoners was Ambassador Kelm of the Zephyrian Republic, a species that had been conquered by the Vaxan 30 years earlier. Kelm had been kept alive specifically to suffer in front of other prisoners, as an example of what happened to those who tried to negotiate with the Empire. His rescue became a symbol of hope for every species still under Vaxan control. The liberation campaign continued for 3 months, as human forces systematically dismantled the infrastructure of oppression that the Vaxan had built over centuries. Supply depots were destroyed, communication networks were severed, and slave camps were emptied one by one. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy began to collapse from within, as word spread that their victims could fight back and win. Vaxan Emperor Krex Noth finally took personal command of his remaining forces, gathering them at the imperial capital for what he declared would be the final battle. The emperor was ancient even by Vaxan standards, having ruled for over 2 centuries through fear and spectacle. He could not comprehend how unknown aliens had turned his unstoppable war machine into a collection of frightened refugees. Krex Noth issued challenges to the human fleet on dozens of frequencies, demanding that their leaders face him in single combat, according to ancient Vaxan traditions. He offered to spare their homeworld if they would acknowledge his superiority and withdraw from his territory. The Emperor's messages went unanswered as Admiral Parker's fleet continued its methodical advance toward Vaxor Prime. The surviving Vaxan military gathered around their capital world in the largest concentration of force the Empire had ever assembled. Krex Noth was confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm the human invaders, but he was about to learn the final lesson that his species' victims had tried to teach him for centuries. Cruelty was not strength and intimidation was not victory. The final battle for Vaxor Prime began at dawn over the Imperial capital, as Admiral Parker's fleet dropped out of hyperspace to face the largest Vaxan armada in history. Emperor Krex Noth had assembled over 300 warships around his homeworld, pulling vessels from every corner of his crumbling empire for this last desperate stand. The Emperor's flagship hung at the center of the formation like a golden jewel, massive and beautiful and terrible. Parker studied the enemy fleet through his tactical displays and felt no fear at the overwhelming numbers arrayed against him. The Vaxan ships maintained their traditional perfect formations, arranged in ceremonial patterns that looked impressive, but left them vulnerable to coordinated attacks. They had learned nothing from their previous defeats, still believing that appearance mattered more than function. The human admiral had spent months studying Vaxan psychology and understood their fundamental weakness. The aliens saw warfare as theater, a performance meant to intimidate enemies into surrender without real fighting. They had never faced an opponent that treated combat as a tool for survival, rather than a form of art. Captain Greg Lewis led the first wave of human ships in a wolf pack assault that shattered the Vaxan outer formations within minutes. His destroyers, and cruisers attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, using tactics learned from Earth's naval warfare to divide and confuse the enemy. The Vaxxan commanders tried to maintain their ceremonial positions even as their ships exploded around them. The battle quickly spread across the entire star system as human forces refused to engage in the formal combat the Vaxxan expected. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet head-on in a massive confrontation, Parker's ships attacked supply lines, communication relays, and isolated formations. The aliens found themselves fighting dozens of separate battles instead of one glorious engagement. Captain Tom Brady's dreadnoughts punched through the Vaxxan middle formations like a hammer through glass, their kinetic weapons turning elegant alien warships into clouds of expanding debris. The Emperor's carefully arranged battle lines collapsed as panic spread through his forces. Vaxxan captains began abandoning their assigned positions to flee or seek easier targets. Marine Colonel Nick Taylor prepared his assault teams for the most dangerous mission of the entire campaign, a direct assault on the Imperial Palace itself. The Vaxxan capital was a city of crystal spires and golden towers built to showcase the Empire's power and wealth. It had never been attacked by enemy forces in over 2 centuries of conquest. Taylor's Marines launched from their assault ships in armored drop pods that screamed through Vaxxer Prime's atmosphere like falling meteors. The planet's surface defenses had been designed to repel orbital bombardment rather than infantry assault, leaving the Imperial city vulnerable to ground attack by determined soldiers. The Marines hit the palace grounds running and immediately encountered Vaxxan Imperial guards. In their ceremonial armor, the alien soldiers were tall and imposing in their elaborate uniforms, but their weapons were works of art rather than practical tools of war. Human assault rifles cut through their ranks before they could deploy their slow-firing energy weapons. Taylor himself led the assault on the Imperial throne room, fighting through corridors lined with treasures stolen from conquered worlds. The palace was a monument to centuries of oppression, filled with artifacts taken from species that no longer existed. Every room told a story of suffering and loss that made the colonel's anger burn hotter. Emperor Krex Noth waited in his throne room surrounded by his personal bodyguards and the last of his loyal advisors. The alien ruler was ancient beyond human understanding, his scaled skin marked with ritual scars that told the story of his rise to power. He had ruled through fear for over 200 years and could not imagine any other way to live. The Emperor rose from his golden throne as Taylor's Marines burst through the massive doors of the chamber. Krex Noth was enormous even by Vaxxan standards, nearly 3 meters tall and wearing armor that had been crafted by master artisans from a dozen conquered worlds. He carried weapons that were priceless works of art, beautiful and deadly and completely useless against human military doctrine. Admiral Parker arrived in the throne room minutes after the initial assault, walking past the bodies of Vaxxan guards who had died trying to protect their emperor. The human admiral was average height and unremarkable in appearance, wearing a simple uniform that showed the wear of months in space. He looked like nothing special compared to the magnificent alien ruler. Krex Noth stared down at Parker and felt something he had never experienced before in his long life: genuine fear. The human's eyes held a coldness that went deeper than space itself, the look of a predator that had evolved on a world where only the strongest survived. The Emperor suddenly understood that he was facing something far more dangerous than any enemy he had conquered. Parker delivered humanity's ultimatum in a calm voice that carried through the massive chamber. The Vaxxan Empire would surrender completely and immediately dismantle all slave camps and military installations. All conquered species would be freed and allowed to return to their homeworlds. The Emperor himself would stand trial for genocide before a tribunal of his victims. The alternative was simple: total annihilation of every Vaxxan world and the complete extinction of their species. Parker made it clear that humanity had the will and capability to carry out this threat. The choice was surrender or death, with no possibility of negotiation or compromise. Krex Noth looked around his throne room at the human soldiers who had shattered his empire in a matter of months. These unremarkable aliens from an unknown world had done what no enemy had ever accomplished. They had made the Vaxxan afraid. The Emperor's voice shook as he formally surrendered his empire and accepted human terms. The transformation of the galaxy began immediately as word spread that the Vaxan Empire had fallen to newcomers called humans. Species that had lived in fear for centuries celebrated in their homes while others emerged from hiding to reclaim their stolen worlds. The age of Vaxan terror was over, replaced by something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Dan Brooks stood on the bridge of his ship in orbit over a liberated world, watching as former slaves took their first steps as free beings. His final log entry reflected on how a simple distress call had awakened something the galaxy had never imagined: the protective fury of a species that had learned to survive by protecting each other. The galaxy had learned that there were Deathworlders among the stars, and they did not tolerate genocide.